Commander Elias Kane had traveled far from Earth before, but never had he stepped into a hall so vast and full of alien majesty. The royal assembly of Zerathia stretched out before him like a cathedral carved from living crystal. The walls shimmered, with veins of glowing minerals, pulsing in rhythm with the heartbeats of the alien world itself. Light poured down from above in radiant beams, scattering across banners of deep silver and emerald. It was supposed to be a routine diplomatic meeting. Humanity had only recently joined the wider galactic stage, still small and fragile compared to the empires of the stars. Elias was chosen not because he was the most skilled diplomat, but because he was steady under pressure. He had a calm face and an honest tone that made alien leaders at least listen, even if they didn't always agree. But nothing could have prepared him for what happened that day. Elias stood in line with the other envoys, waiting for their formal introductions to the Zerathian court. Around him were tall, graceful figures, representatives of stronger races, armored in flowing robes and carrying symbols of ancient authority. The Zerathians themselves were unlike anything Elias had seen before, humanoid in shape, yet their skin carried faint luminescence, patterns that shifted like constellations. Their eyes glowed faint silver, deep and unblinking. They radiated power, dignity, and something that made Elias feel very small. At the far end of the chamber sat the throne of Zerathia, where King Thalion and Queen Merilith observed the gathering. They looked as if they were carved from stars themselves, their presence commanding the attention of all. At their side, on a smaller but no less dignified seat, sat their daughter, Princess Sarilith. Elias had read brief reports about her. She was young by Zerathian standards, which still meant centuries of life behind her. She was respected as wise, admired as graceful, and known for her strong will. Her luminous skin carried sharper streaks of light than most, marking her as heir to the throne. But reports never captured the force of her presence. Even when silent, she seemed to watch with an intensity that pierced deeper than sight. One by one, envoys were called forward. Each bowed, spoke their words of respect, and pledged cooperation in the galactic fight against the swarm, the ancient hive species that threatened all civilizations. Elias rehearsed his words quietly as he waited, repeating them to himself. He had no illusions about his importance. Humanity was a young race, and most saw Earth as a minor player, untested and unneeded. His role was simply to remind them humanity was willing to stand beside allies. Finally, his name was called. Commander Elias Kane, envoy of Terra, the herald announced. Elias stepped forward. His boots echoed softly against the crystalline floor as he approached the thrones. He bowed, careful not to appear clumsy, and raised his head to deliver his words. But before he could speak, movement came from the side. Princess Sarilith rose. The chamber grew still. All eyes followed her as she walked down from her seat. Her steps were measured, graceful yet heavy with purpose. She stopped before Elias, her silver eyes fixed on him, her luminous patterns glowing brighter. For a moment, Elias wondered if he had made some mistake, if his presence had offended her. Then she raised her hand and pointed at him. Her voice, calm but carrying the strength of command, echoed through the great hall. "I want him." The words rippled like thunder. For a heartbeat, silence ruled the chamber. Even the glowing walls seemed to dim as though stunned. Elias froze. His mind went blank. Did she just point at me? Did she mean me? The king and queen exchanged glances, their composure unbroken yet clearly shaken. Around the chamber, murmurs rose like whispers of wind. Representatives leaned toward one another, some confused, some shocked, some amused. The herald, who had been preparing to continue the ceremony, stood frozen as if turned to stone. Elias opened his mouth, but found no words. He had faced alien warlords, sat in tense negotiations, and even been under fire during past missions. But never had he been singled out in such a way, by a royal, in front of an entire court. Princess Sarilith lowered her hand slowly. Her gaze, never leaving his King Thalion, spoke. his voice deep, steady, carrying the weight of centuries. "Daughter, explain yourself." Saralith bowed slightly toward her father, but her voice remained clear. "Our customs allow the heir of Zerathia to name a champion. In times of peril, such a choice must be made. I choose this human." She pointed once more, leaving no doubt. "I choose him." The chamber erupted in noise. Nobles rose to their feet, arguing loudly. Some laughed in disbelief, others demanded explanations. The queen raised her hand, calling for silence, but it took long moments before order returned. Elias's pulse hammered in his chest. Champion? What in the stars does that mean? He felt the weight of countless alien eyes on him, their expressions, ranging from anger to curiosity. He wanted to speak, to ask what was happening, but no words seemed safe. Instead, he stood rooted to the spot, caught between fear and disbelief. The king's gaze returned to him, sharp as a blade. "Human," he said slowly. "Do you understand what this means?" Elias shook his head honestly. "No, Your Majesty, I do not." The queen's voice was softer but no less piercing. "It means, envoy of Terra, that our daughter has chosen you to stand beside her in the battles to come, not as a servant, not as a guest, but as a champion of Zerathia." The word champion hung in the air like fire. Elias could feel the heat of it, though he still didn't fully grasp its meaning. Around the chamber, nobles muttered. Some scoffed openly. A human? A champion? It was unheard of. Their kind valued strength, honor, and history. Humanity had little, of any, at least in their eyes. Elias swallowed hard. He wanted to protest, to say there must be a mistake, but when he glanced at Saralith, he found no hint of doubt in her expression. Her eyes glowed with certainty, as though she had seen something invisible to everyone else. For a long moment, he stood frozen. His heart told him to run, to step back, to refuse, but his legs would not move, and his voice remained caught in his throat. In that vast chamber under the unblinking gaze of alien royalty, Elias Kane, envoy of a young and fragile humanity, stood frozen, chosen by a princess of stars, and nothing in his life would ever be the same again. The assembly hall still trembled with whispers long after the princess's declaration. Elias Kane remained in the center, standing like a statue, his chest tight as though the whole galaxy pressed down on him. The Zerathian nobles filled the chamber with uneasy voices, their glowing patterns flickering in agitation. "Impossible," one noble muttered. "A human?" Another scoffed. "Barely out of the cradle of their world. Madness. The princess cannot be serious." King Thalion raised his hand. The noise quieted at once, though unease still hung in the air. His silver eyes narrowed as he looked from his daughter to Elias. "Saralith," he said, his voice steady, but heavy. "You have declared before the court and before the stars that this human shall be your champion. Do you understand the weight of such a choice?" The princess bowed her head slightly in respect but kept her voice firm. "Yes, father, I understand." The queen, Marilith, leaned forward in her throne. Her expression was calm, but her luminous patterns dimmed, betraying concern. "And why, daughter, do you choose this one? Among all who stand here, why him?" Saralith turned her gaze back to Elias. Her silver eyes glowed brighter, as though reflecting a hidden light. "Because he is the one who carries what we need. Strength can be found in many. Power can be trained, but spirit, the fire that endures when all else fails, that is rare. I saw it in him the moment he stepped forward." The chamber erupted again. Some nobles shook their heads. Others laughed, bitterly. Elias felt his ears burn. "She saw something in me? A fire? I was just standing there trying not to trip over my boots." King Thalion silenced the hall with a single gesture. His gaze remained fixed on his daughter. "Our traditions are not games, Saralith. To name a champion is to bind fate. The chosen stands with you in trials and battle and in the legacy of our people. It is no light matter. Are you prepared for what will follow?" Yes, she said simply. The king turned then to Elias. His eyes were sharp, piercing, but not cruel. And you, human? Do you accept what has been placed before you? Do you accept this role? Elias's throat tightened. Every instinct screamed to say no. He was a diplomat, not a warrior. His orders had been clear: represent Earth, speak with respect, and avoid offense. Nothing in his training had prepared him for this. He opened his mouth, but the words refused to come. His mind swirled with doubts. What if I say no? Will that insult them? Will it put Earth at risk? And what if I say yes? What am I even agreeing to? The silence stretched. All eyes watched him, thousands of glowing eyes, unblinking, expectant. Finally, Elias found his voice, though it shook. I do not understand what this means, but if the princess believes in me, then I cannot refuse. The nobles gasped. Some shook their heads in disbelief. The queen's expression softened, but the king remained stern. Very well, Thalion said at last. His voice echoed like stone. Then the choice is made. Saralith has named her champion, and the human has accepted. The path ahead will not be easy. He must prove himself worthy, or risk disgrace upon us all. With that, the formal assembly ended. The royal chambers later, Elias was escorted through the crystal halls of the palace. The corridors glowed faintly, alive with flowing light, as if the walls themselves carried the lifeblood of the planet. Guards walked at his sides, tall and armored, their expressions unreadable. His thoughts spun in chaos. What just happened? How did I get dragged into this? At last the guards stopped before a tall archway. The doors opened, and Elias stepped into a chamber vast yet quiet. Here the walls glowed more softly, colors shifting like calm water. At the far end, seated around a low table of carved stone, were the king, the queen, and Princess Saralith. Sit, the king commanded. Elias obeyed, feeling out of place in his plain envoy uniform. The queen spoke first. You must understand, Commander Kane, the title of champion is not ceremonial. It is a binding trust. Our ancestors created this tradition in times of great danger, when the heir to the throne would choose one to fight at their side. The champion is not merely a guard, but a partner in trials that shape the future of Zerathia. Elias swallowed. With respect, Your Majesty, I am no warrior. I am here as a diplomat. Surely your people have better choices than me. Saralith leaned forward, her voice calm but unshaken. They have warriors. They have champions of strength and skill. But they do not have you. Her eyes held his, steady and unyielding. You are human. Your kind has lived on the edge of survival, facing challenges with little but will and creativity. That is what I need. That is what Zerathia needs. Elias shook his head slowly. I don't see it. I'm not special. I'm just me. The princess smiled faintly. Perhaps you do not see it, but I do. The king's voice rumbled. If you are to hold this role, you must prove it. Words are not enough. Tomorrow you will begin the trials. They will test your body, your mind, and your spirit. If you fail, the choice will be null. If you succeed, you will stand beside my daughter as her true champion. Elias felt his stomach sink. Trials, tests? This was spiraling further out of control. But what choice did he have? I understand, he said quietly. The queen's luminous patterns brightened slightly. Do not fear, Elias Kane. You are not expected to become something you are not. The trials are not meant to measure strength alone, they reveal truth. Perhaps that is why my daughter chose you. Saralith's gaze never left him. You will not face them alone. I will guide you. Something in her tone steadied him, though his doubts still swirled like storms. A night of restless thoughts. That night, Elias was given quarters within the palace. The chamber was beautiful, walls alive with glowing veins, a ceiling that shimmered like a night sky, and a bed softer than any he had known. But he could not sleep. He paced, his thoughts heavy. Why me? She says she sees something in me, but what if she's wrong? What if I fail and make humanity look like fools? He thought of Earth, his home. Compared to the vast civilizations of the galaxy, it was small, fragile, still struggling to unite its own nations. If he failed here, it would confirm what many already believed, that humanity was too young, too weak, too unworthy. He sat on the edge of the bed, burying his face in his hands. For the first time in years, fear threatened to break him. Not fear of death, but fear of letting down more than just himself. A soft chime sounded. The door slid open, and Sarilith entered quietly. Her luminous patterns glowed faintly in the dim room. You cannot sleep, she said gently. Elias looked up, startled. No, too much on my mind. She walked closer, her steps silent. Doubt is natural. Even the strongest warriors doubt before their trials. But doubt does not mean failure, it means you care for the outcome. Elias gave a small, bitter laugh. I'm just worried I'll embarrass myself. And humanity with me. Sarilith tilted, her head slightly. You fear weakness. But weakness is not what I saw in you. I saw the strength to endure. That is rarer than you think. Her words, spoken so calmly, sank deeper than Elias expected. For a moment, the storm in his mind quieted. Why? Me? He asked again, his voice low. Out of all the beings you could have chosen, why me? She looked at him steadily. Because when you stood before us, you did not look like the others. They wore their pride like armor. They entered seeking to impress. But you stood with humility. You carried doubt, yet you faced the hall anyway. That is courage. That is what I want. Elias fell silent. For the first time since the declaration, he felt something other than fear. He felt a spark of resolve. Sarilith turned toward the door. Rest now, Elias Kane. Tomorrow begins your trials. Do not think of failure. Think only of walking forward step by step. That is all that matters. When she left, the room felt quieter, calmer. Elias lay back on the bed, his mind still restless, but steadier than before. He did not know if he could succeed, but for the first time he wanted to try. That night, under the glowing ceiling of the Zarathian palace, Elias Kane accepted the weight of a choice not his own. Tomorrow, he would step into trials beyond his understanding. And though fear remained, so too did the spark the princess claimed to see. The morning came quickly. Elias Kane woke to a soft chiming sound that filled the chamber. The walls glowed brighter, signaling the rise of Zarathia's twin suns. His stomach felt tight, and his thoughts were restless, but he forced himself to rise. Today was the beginning of the trials. He dressed in simple training clothes provided by the palace attendants. The material was smooth and light, unlike anything from Earth, but strong enough to withstand strain. As he stood before the mirror-like surface of the wall, he barely recognized himself. His face was pale, his eyes tired, but somewhere behind them burned the nervous determination that had carried him this far. A guard came to escort him. Tall, armored, with luminous patterns glowing faintly on his face, the guard's expression betrayed no emotion. Elias followed him through winding halls until they entered an enormous courtyard. The space was vast, surrounded by high crystal walls. Alien plants grew in spirals, glowing with faint colors, while the air shimmered with energy. Waiting there were nobles, warriors, and members of the court. They filled the edges of the courtyard, eager to witness the humans' performance. Elias felt their eyes on him, heavy with doubt. At the center stood King Thalion, Queen Marilith, and Princess Sarilith. The princess's eyes met his, calm yet filled with quiet fire. The king raised his voice deep and steady. The champion of our heir must prove himself through the trials. Body, mind, and spirit will be tested. Let none say that our traditions are broken without cause. Human, step forward. Elias obeyed, his steps echoing softly on the stone floor. He felt exposed, like prey surrounded by predators. The king gestured. The first trial, the trial of strength. Trial of strength. From the opposite side of the courtyard, two Zarathian warriors stepped forward. They were towering, broad-shouldered, their luminous patterns sharp and fierce. Each carried a weapon that shimmered like liquid metal, shifting between spear and blade as they moved. Elias's heart sank. He had no such weapon, no training in their style of combat. A guard handed him a staff, plain, light, nothing compared to the alien weapons. "You will face them," the king declared. "Not to the death, but to prove you can endure. Last until the bell sounds and you succeed." Elias gripped the staff with sweaty hands. Endure. Just endure. The warriors circled him, their movements smooth, predatory. One lunged first, weapon slicing down. Elias barely raised the staff in time, the force jarring his arms. The second came, from the side, and Elias stumbled back, heart pounding. They pressed him hard, blow after blow, each strike heavier than he thought possible. He had no hope of winning. All he could do was block, dodge, survive. His arms shook, his breath burned, and every muscle screamed. The crowd watched, many smirking, expecting him to fall within moments. But Elias refused. Every time he thought he would collapse, he forced himself one step more. He remembered Earth's history, how humanity had survived ice, fire, storms, and wars. Not through strength, but through stubbornness. Minutes dragged like hours. His body felt broken, yet he stood. Finally, the bell rang. The warriors lowered their weapons. Elias collapsed to one knee, gasping for air, but he had not fallen completely. The crowd murmured, surprised. The nobles expected failure, but the human had endured. Saralith's eyes glowed brighter, pride hidden behind her calm expression. Trial of mind. After a short rest, the king announced the next challenge. The second trial, the Labyrinth of Echoes. Elias was led into a vast crystalline maze. The walls shimmered like mirrors, reflecting endless versions of himself. The air buzzed faintly, filled with whispers that were not real. "This trial," the queen explained, "tests clarity of thought. The labyrinth shows illusions of fear and doubt. To succeed, you must find the true path and not lose yourself." Elias stepped inside. Immediately, the whispers grew louder. "You are weak. You do not belong here. You will fail, and Earth will be shamed." The reflections in the walls twisted, showing versions of him falling, failing, being mocked by Zarathians. He clenched his fists, forcing himself forward. "They're not real. Just keep walking." The maze twisted endlessly, every turn leading to more illusions. At times he saw images of Earth burning under the swarm. His family, calling his name, his fellow envoys shaking their heads in disappointment. He almost broke. His chest ached and his mind screamed to give up, but he remembered Saralith's words from the night before. Think only of walking forward, step by step. So he did. One step, then another. He ignored the whispers, ignored the lies. When doubt screamed, he whispered to himself, "Keep moving." At last he reached the heart of the labyrinth. A single glowing crystal pulsed there, pure and steady. When he touched it, the illusions vanished and the path cleared. He had succeeded. Trial of spirit. The final trial came as the suns began to set, painting the sky with silver light. The third trial, the king announced, is the trial of spirit. Here the champion must show his heart, his true nature. No strength, no cunning will save you, only what lies within. Elias was led to a quiet garden. The crowd remained outside while he entered alone. In the center stood a great being, an elder of Zarathia, tall and ancient, its body glowing with deep golden patterns. The elder's voice was soft yet filled with immense power. "Human, you stand as chosen. To pass this trial, you must answer a question, not with words, but with truth. What is it you fight for? Why do you stand here?" Elias's mouth went dry. He wanted to say survival or duty or Earth. But the elder's gaze pierced deeper, as if lies would shatter instantly. Slowly, he spoke. "I fight because we must. Humanity is small, fragile, yes, but we want to live, to grow, to stand beside others in this galaxy. I fight not because I am strong, but because I refuse to give up. Even when the odds are impossible, I cannot give up." The elders studied him in silence. Then it nodded. "Your spirit is true. That is enough." The trial was complete. After the trials, when Elias returned to the courtyard, exhausted beyond measure, the court awaited. The nobles expected failure, yet he had passed all 3 trials. He stood battered, bruised, and weary, but unbroken. King Thalion regarded him with unreadable eyes. Then he spoke. "You have endured. You have faced illusions and revealed your spirit. You are no warrior of Zerathia, but perhaps you are something more." The queen's patterns glowed warmly. "The trials have spoken. This human carries strength of a different kind. He is worthy to stand as champion." The crowd murmured again, this time not with scorn, but with reluctant respect. Some still doubted, but others nodded slowly. Saralith stepped forward, her voice calm but proud. "You see now why I chose him. He may not carry our strength, but he carries the strength that matters." Elias bowed his head, too tired to speak, but inside, something shifted. For the first time, he believed, just a little, that maybe he truly could stand in this role. The king raised his hand once more. "Then it is decided. Elias Kane of Terra shall serve as champion to Princess Saralith, but let it be known, this is only the beginning. Greater trials await beyond these walls when the swarm comes." The crowd bowed their heads in acknowledgement, and, as the sun set fully, casting silver light across the courtyard, Elias stood beside Saralith, not as an envoy, not as an outsider, but as her champion. The days after the trials were different for Elias Kane. He was no longer just a visitor, no longer only the human envoy of Earth. He was now the champion of Princess Saralith. The title carried weight, and everywhere he walked inside the shining halls of the Zerathian palace, eyes followed him. Some looked with respect, some with doubt, and some with curiosity, but Elias himself still felt the same. His muscles still ached from the trial of strength. His mind still remembered the whispers of the labyrinth of echoes. His heart still carried the weight of the elder's question. He was no hero, not yet. He was only trying to live up to what Saralith believed she had seen in him. Every morning Saralith met him in the training courtyard. She guided him through Zerathian combat drills, showing him how to move with the staff, how to dodge, how to strike. Her movements were flawless, graceful as flowing water. But Elias struggled. He stumbled, sweated, and often dropped his weapon. Yet Saralith never scolded him. She only repeated calmly, "Again." When he collapsed one afternoon, breathless and sore, she stood above him and said, "You learn not to win with strength, Elias Kane. You learn to survive. And sometimes, survival is victory." Those words carried him forward. The warning one. Evening, while Elias was still catching his breath after another hard training session, the Royal Council gathered in the throne hall. The mood was tense. General Korith, a towering Zerathian warrior clad in silver armor, spoke first. His patterns pulsed bright with alarm. "My king, my queen, the swarm has entered the outer reaches of our system. Scouts report hive ships moving in formation. Their numbers are great." A murmur of unease swept through the council. Even the nobles, usually so proud, lowered their voices. The king's expression remained steady, but his patterns dimmed slightly. "How long before they reach our world?" "Days, perhaps less," the general answered. The queen looked toward her daughter. "It begins sooner than we thought." Elias felt his chest tighten. The swarm. He had heard stories, ships like dark hives drifting through space, releasing endless waves of creatures that consumed everything in their path. Worlds had fallen before them, civilizations destroyed. Now they were here. General Korith continued, "We must strike first. Our fleets will meet them before they reach Zerathia. With the strength of our warriors and our weapons, we will crush their vanguard and scatter their forces. The council nodded, many agreeing. Zerathians trusted strength and tradition. Direct battle was their way. But Elias raised his hand slightly. His voice was hesitant but firm. "Forgive me, General, but if you attack them the way you always do, they will expect it. The swarm adapts. They will be ready." The general frowned, his patterns flashing sharply. And what would a human envoy know of war against the swarm? Elias swallowed, but Saralith spoke before he could answer. "He is my champion. Let him speak." The room grew silent. All eyes turned to Elias. His hands shook slightly, but he forced himself to stand straighter. "On Earth," he began slowly, "we never won battles by being stronger. We won by being unpredictable. We used tricks, traps, deception. We changed our plans when the enemy thought they understood us. If you fight the swarm the way you always fight, you give them the advantage. But if you fight differently, you may surprise them," some nobles scoffed. "Tricks, deception, that is cowardice." Another said, "The swarm is endless. What good are human games against such numbers?" But the queen's eyes glowed brighter with thought. The king leaned back, considering. Saralith looked at her father and mother. "He is right. Our strength is great. But the swarm has broken many strong civilizations. We need something new." King Thalion finally spoke. "Then let us test this human's idea. We will allow him to co-command the Vanguard fleet alongside Saralith. If his strategies fail, it will be his shame. If they succeed, Zerathia will owe him more than words." Elias felt his knees nearly buckle. Command a fleet? Him? But there was no way to refuse. He bowed his head. "I will try," preparing for battle. The next day, Elias stood aboard a Zerathian warship for the first time. The vessel was massive, a living construct of crystal and energy, its walls pulsing with light. From its command deck, stars stretched out in endless blackness. Saralith stood beside him, tall and calm, her patterns glowing faintly. Around them, officers worked in silence, their movements precise. Many cast doubtful glances at Elias, but none spoke against the king's order. Elias studied the star maps displayed before him. The swarm's hive ships moved like a tide, advancing, with terrifying certainty. Their numbers were larger than he had imagined. He breathed deeply. "Think, Elias. Think like a human. They expect the Zerathians to come straight at them, so don't." He pointed to the map. "Here. We strike not at their front, but at their flank. A small force draws them in, makes them think you are committing to a direct assault. But while they focus, the rest of the fleet circles and cuts into their side. Their formation will break." The officers frowned. "Risky," one said. "The smaller force could be destroyed." "Yes," Elias admitted, "but with the right bait, the swarm will chase without thinking. They always hunger. That hunger blinds them." Saralith nodded. "I will lead the bait force." Elias turned quickly. "No, you can't." She cut him off with a calm look. "I can, and I will. Do you doubt me, champion?" Elias's mouth went dry. He shook his head. "No, but I don't want you walking into danger alone." "You will be with me," she said simply, and so it was decided. The eve of battle that night. Elias stood at the viewing deck of the warship, staring into the stars. His hands gripped the rail tightly. Doubt gnawed at him. What if I'm wrong? What if this plan destroys us all? He heard footsteps and turned. Saralith approached, her silver eyes steady, her patterns glowing faintly in the dim light. "You doubt," she said softly. "Yes," Elias admitted. "I've never commanded a fleet. I've never fought the swarm. What if my idea fails?" She stepped closer. "Then we will fall together. But if it succeeds, we will live. That is the only choice any of us ever have." Elias looked at her. Her calm strength steadied him in ways he could not explain. "Why do you trust me so much?" he asked quietly. "Because I see what others do not," she replied. "I see a man who refuses to stop, even when he believes he cannot win. That is the kind of strength the swarm does not understand. That is why I chose you." Her words lit something inside him, something that pushed back the doubt. "Then we'll make them understand," Elias said firmly. Saralith's lips curved into the faintest of smiles. The swarm strikes. The next day, the Zarathian fleet met the swarm at the edge of their system. From the command deck, Elias saw the enemy for the first time. Hive ships blotted out the stars, vast and jagged, swarming with smaller craft that buzzed like insects. They moved in perfect hunger-driven unity, an endless tide. "Enemy approaching," an officer announced. Saralith stood tall beside Elias. "Begin the maneuver." The smaller force, including their own warship, broke from the main fleet and moved directly toward the swarm. Immediately, the enemy reacted. Waves of dark ships poured forward, chasing, hungering. Elias's heart pounded. "It's working. They think we're foolish enough to attack head-on." "Hold position," he ordered. The swarm closed in, surrounding them. The ship shook as the first impacts struck the shields. Officers tensed. "Not yet," Elias said. "Wait. Wait." Then the larger Zarathian fleet swept in from the side, striking the swarm's flank with devastating force. Hive ships cracked under the sudden assault. The enemy's perfect formation broke. Cheers erupted across the command deck, but Elias knew it was not over. "Stay sharp. They'll adapt." And indeed the swarm shifted, turning to meet the new threat. But the sudden confusion gave the Zarathians their first real victory. A turning point. Hours of battle followed, stars lit with fire and shadow. Elias directed maneuvers, Saralith commanded with fearless presence, and together they held the line. For the first time, the swarm faltered against Zarathia. When at last the hive ships began to retreat, the fleet roared in triumph. The enemy was not destroyed, but the message was clear. They could be fought, they could be beaten. On the command deck, Saralith turned to Elias. Her silver eyes glowed brighter than ever. "You see, you are no ordinary envoy. You are my champion." Elias, exhausted but alive, finally allowed himself a small smile. For the first time, he believed it too. The battle had shifted, but the war was far from over. The swarm had retreated temporarily, but their massive hive ships loomed on the edge of Zarathia's system, a reminder of the danger still pressing in. Elias Kane stood on the bridge of the flagship, his hands gripping the rail as he stared at the stars. The glow of the retreating hive ships reflected faintly in his eyes, a reminder of how close the galaxy had come to destruction. Beside him, Princess Saralith moved with calm grace, her luminous patterns glowing steadily. She had become more than a mentor in battle. She was his partner, guiding the fleet with insight and courage. The two of them had developed a quiet rhythm. He suggested maneuvers, she commanded forces, and together they led the Zarathian fleet, with tactics that even the most experienced generals had never considered. But there was no time to celebrate. Reports came in from scouts. The main swarm hive ships were approaching faster than anticipated. This time, retreat would not be an option. The final plan, King Thalion called a council meeting aboard the flagship. Generals, nobles, and officers crowded the room. The atmosphere was tense, heavy with expectation. "The swarm will reach our homeworld within hours," General Karith reported. "Their strength is overwhelming. Even our full fleet may struggle." Elias took a deep breath. "We have one advantage," he said. "The swarm expects a direct assault. If we divide the fleet, with a small force acting as bait, we can draw them in and strike at the heart of their formation. But we need someone to lead the bait force, someone they cannot resist following." All eyes turned to Saralith. She nodded. "I will lead it. Elias, you will guide the main strike into the hive's core while I draw their attention." Elias swallowed. "We could both die." "Perhaps," Saralith said simply. "But if we succeed, Zarathia will survive." The king's eyes met Elias's. "Your strategy is risky, human," Yet, it is bold. Boldness is sometimes what is needed against the swarm. You will co-command with my daughter. May your courage match your wit." Elias nodded. His hands were steady now, heart filled with resolve. "For the first time, I believe in what I can do. I cannot fail." Into the heart of battle. The fleet moved through space with silent precision. The smaller vanguard, led by Saralith, advanced toward the swarm first. Hive ships loomed ahead, enormous, jagged, like dark mountains floating in the void. Waves of smaller attack crafts buzzed like insects around them. Elias watched from the command deck, heart pounding. Every move mattered. One mistake, and the fleet could be destroyed. Saralith's voice came over the communicator. "Hold your positions, wait for the signal." The signal came. A faint pulse through the fleet's sensors. Elias ordered the main force to execute the flank maneuver. Ships moved like shadows, sliding silently into position around the swarm's side. The hive ships responded immediately. Smaller attack vessels surged toward Saralith's bait force, trying to crush it. Her ship danced through the swarm, fast and precise, drawing them in. Elias's hands flew over the controls. "Now, engage!" The main fleet struck the swarm's flank. Massive hive ships shuddered under the assault, shields cracking under the concentrated energy blasts. The swarm faltered, their perfect formation breaking for the first time in decades. The heart of the hive. Despite their success, the battle was far from over. Reports indicated the hive's central command ship remained intact, protected by layers of defenses. Elias and Saralith knew what had to be done. A direct strike into the heart of the hive. "We must go in," Elias said. "This is our chance to end the invasion." Saralith nodded. "We go together. No one else can do this." The two led a small squadron directly toward the hive's core. Waves of enemy fighters attacked from all sides. Elias and Saralith's ships weaved through them with precision, their coordination flawless. At last the core came into view, a monstrous structure, alive with energy, pulsing as though it had its own heartbeat. It was terrifying in scale and power. "We need to destroy that," Elias said. "If it falls, the rest will scatter." Saralith's hand rested briefly on his arm. "We can do this. Together." The two led the strike, weaving through defenses, dodging energy blasts, and targeting critical weak points. Their ships were battered, shields failing, but they pressed on. The moment of truth. Elias and Saralith reached the central chamber of the hive ship. From there, they could release an energy charge powerful enough to destroy the core. But to do so, they had to enter a hazardous zone filled with volatile energy streams. "This is it," Elias said, gripping the controls. "No turning back." Saralith nodded. "We make history, human, or we die trying." The ship plunged into the core chamber. Energy arced around them like lightning, shaking the vessel. Elias held steady, following the path to the central reactor. The swarm fought ferociously, but the two moved as one, each action precise and deliberate. Finally, they reached the reactor. Elias set the energy charge. Saralith confirmed the timing. "Now," she said. He triggered it. The reactor exploded, in a wave of light and force. The hive ship shook violently, alarms blaring. Outside, the swarm's formation collapsed. Smaller attack vessels fled in chaos. The pulse of energy spread outward, crippling the hive and scattering the enemy. The swarm's advance had been halted, their power broken for now. Victory and recognition. The fleet regrouped. The stars were calm once more, though the scars of battle remained in space. The Zarathian ships cheered, shields flashing in celebration. Elias and Saralith returned to the flagship, exhausted but alive. King Thalion stepped forward. His eyes were unreadable at first. Then he smiled faintly. "You have done what many thought impossible. You have faced the swarm and struck at their heart. Zarathia owes you a debt that words cannot express." The Queen's patterns glowed warmly. "Your courage, human, has proven the worth of your kind. The galaxy has seen that humanity can stand alongside the greatest civilizations." Saralith approached Elias, her silver eyes steady. "Do you see now why I chose you?" He shook his head, a small smile breaking across his face. I think I'm beginning to understand. You carried more than a weapon or skill, she said. You carried hope, determination, and the will to endure. That is what makes a champion. Elias looked around at the Zarathians who had doubted him, at the ships he had helped guide, and then back at Sarilith. Then I will continue to fight. For Earth, for Zarathia, and for anyone who cannot fight for themselves. Her hand rested lightly on his arm. Then let us face the galaxy together. Humanity has proven its flame, and that flame will not be extinguished. A new beginning. The swarm had retreated for now, but the galaxy remained dangerous. Worlds still trembled in fear of the hive species. But Elias Kane, a human, had changed the tide of battle. He had shown courage, ingenuity, and determination, qualities that even the oldest civilizations admired. He stood beside Sarilith on the observation deck, watching the stars stretch endlessly before them. For the first time, he felt something he had never felt before: belonging. Humanity, fragile and small, had a place among the stars. And he had a place beside those who believed in the value of courage and heart. Sarilith's voice broke the silence. Tomorrow, we prepare for what comes next. But tonight, we remember what we have achieved. You were chosen for a reason, Elias, Kane, and together we will face the challenges ahead. He nodded, looking at her. Together. And as the stars shimmered above Zarathia, humanity's flame burned brighter than ever, a light that would guide the galaxy through darkness, courage born from a human heart,